The professor stole a glance at his student's legs while driving, and ended up running a red light without noticing.
빨간불인데 그냥 가요?
저런 건 지키는 게 바보야.
The young woman knew exactly what the professor was implying. After all, whether she got into graduate school depended entirely on him. But just after he finished speaking, a traffic officer pulled them over. The officer informed him that he had run a red light, and immediately began writing a ticket for him to sign. The professor was convinced they had no proof, so he played dumb and started making excuses. But the officer was not having it. He pulled out video footage of the violation, with no way to deny it. The professor quickly tried to charm his way out of it, asking if the offense could be changed to something minor like not wearing a seatbelt. But when the officer noticed he was not wearing one, he immediately added another violation to the ticket. The professor was humiliated again, embarrassing himself in front of the student he liked. He signed the ticket with an irritated expression, his lips twitching with anger. The moment the officer left, the professor angrily drove after him. But what he did not know was that the officer was already waiting at the next intersection. As the professor's car approached the line, the officer switched the light to red, then pulled out a camera, planning to capture another violation. But instead of stopping, the professor rolled down his window and started shouting insults. To avoid being caught again, he turned onto a narrow side road. Although he escaped the ticket for the moment, he ended up driving into a strange village. Seeing the student look nervous only made him more excited. He deliberately parked by the river, hoping something would happen between them. Surrounded by beautiful scenery, the young woman gradually relaxed. The two chatted casually, and the atmosphere quickly turned intimate. But just as the professor tried to take things further, the woman suddenly acted as if she had lost her mind. After forcefully pushing him away, she ran into the nearby hills. Annoyed that the mood had been ruined, the professor shouted after her. At that moment, an eagle flew overhead, and suddenly dropped dead from the sky. The professor glanced at it, but paid little attention. Just as he was about to listen to some music, a mysterious man came down from the mountain. Game animals hung from his waist. Apparently he had come for the dead eagle. He circled around the car, then flashed the professor a strange grin. His yellow teeth sent a chill down the professor's spine, and blood kept dripping from the stick he carried. The man pulled a rat from his pocket, and forced it to eat some rat poison. After tossing the rat aside, he pulled out a baby rat, and fed it poison as well. Then he shooed the rats away and waited for them to die. The bizarre behavior made the professor roll up his window, but the man wandered over to the car swinging his stick in confusion. Because the windows were tinted, he could not see inside, so he simply built a fire, and sat nearby eating roasted potatoes. The professor still hoped the girl would return, and could not bring himself to leave alone. Meanwhile, the girl accidentally ran into two thugs in the hills. They dragged over a large sack, and began kicking it repeatedly. When they emptied the contents, a high school-aged boy fell out. The boy had been bullied so badly he did not dare resist. The two men shoved him back into the sack, and beat him again, then tossed him into a pit they had already dug, and buried him under the dirt. The girl covered her mouth tightly, terrified they would spot her. After waiting a while, the thugs realized the boy was no longer breathing. Thinking they had gone too far, they quickly dug him back out, loaded him onto a motorcycle and sped down the mountain. The professor was just about to drive away, when he suddenly spotted the two thugs. They came running toward Ergo shouting loudly, but the moment they noticed the professor's car, they surrounded it like prey. They circled the vehicle several times, before parking their motorcycle nearby. Ergo excitedly picked up the dead eagle, and proudly showed it off to them. When the professor realized they knew each other, he quickly covered his head with a coat, planning to pretend he was asleep. But one of the thugs pressed himself against the windshield. Seeing no movement inside, he assumed the professor had died in the car. When Xiao Hei found the doors locked, he became even more convinced, so he grabbed a rock and smashed it against the window. When nothing happened, the two were completely baffled. The red-haired thug hauled up an even larger rock and climbed onto the roof, planning to smash through the sunroof. The professor nearly jumped out of his skin. Unable to keep pretending, he suddenly started the car. The red-haired thug instantly lost his balance, and tumbled off the vehicle. Unfortunately, the car became stuck in a sand pit, sending the professor into a panic. The men realized he was awake, and grabbed rocks as they closed in. With nowhere left to run, the professor got out and tried to negotiate. He immediately started grilling them with questions, and somehow managed to bluff them for a moment. But when he saw Xiao Hei gripping a rock, the professor's hands began trembling uncontrollably. He tried to act calm, but Xiao Hei saw right through his fear. Xiao Hei smirked, and instantly became much more aggressive. Sensing trouble, the professor tried to climb back into the car, but he was grabbed immediately, and dragged out by force. While the two struggled, Ergo circled behind the professor. The girl limped down a narrow trail, and soon sat down exhausted. She removed her shoes and socks to rest, then suddenly met a man riding a motorcycle. Seeing that he looked honest and friendly, the girl sweetly asked him for help. The man was caught off guard, and quickly agreed to take her down the mountain. When the thugs realized the professor was awake, they immediately searched his pockets, looking for anything valuable. Instead, they found his business card. Learning that he was a music professor, the thugs assumed he was someone important, and immediately became more respectful. They were just about to let him leave, when they suddenly heard a motorcycle approaching. Seeing the man arrive with the girl. The thugs bowed respectfully. The girl was startled to see all of them gathered together, and the sack lying nearby made her even more nervous. But the man still wore a friendly smile, promising to take her to the bus station soon. He exchanged a few words with the others. Clearly he was the leader of the group. The girl had walked right into a trap, and was terrified inside. Yet the man kept smiling politely, and invited her to sit beside him. Too frightened to refuse, she nervously sat down nearby. The man noticed the professor's predicament, and kindly offered to help. Seeing the car stuck in the sand, he called his men over to push it. When he realized they needed more help, he leered at the girl and called her over, then grabbed her foot, telling her to work the gas pedal when instructed. As he casually removed his shirt, a scar nearly half a meter long was revealed. The professor saw it, and could not help taking a sharp breath. After struggling for a long time, they still could not free the car. The man immediately pulled out his phone and kindly called a tow truck, but by then he was already holding the girl's student ID card. The man glanced back over his shoulder, then quietly slipped the ID into his pocket. The professor and the girl were terrified, afraid the others would discover they knew each other. The thugs set up a stone slab and gathered around to grill meat. Although they showed no obvious hostility, just looking at Ergo still sent chills down the professor's spine. Ergo grabbed a chunk of raw meat and stuffed it into his mouth without cooking it. Noticing his nervousness, the man wrapped some grilled meat and handed it over. He explained that Ergo had suffered a head injury as a child, which was why he acted so strangely. As for slaughtering pigs, Ergo always claimed he could see the sow smiling. The whole group burst into laughter. The laughter only made the professor more uneasy. Then the man peeled off a few pieces of raw meat and forced the professor to try them. Too afraid to refuse, he swallowed them while fighting back nausea. The man answered a phone call and stepped away. The two younger thugs immediately began eyeing the girl, hiding behind the professor. They crudely discussed how attractive she was. The professor heard every word, and began worrying about the girl's safety. The red-haired thug grew interested, and volunteered to take the girl to the station. He tried to press his case, but the man immediately scolded him, leaving him no choice but to nod and accept the decision. Wanting to protect the girl, the professor offered to drive her away himself, but the man insisted that since he had promised her a ride, he would personally take her to the station. Then he smiled and looked at the girl, saying the choice was entirely hers. The girl knew the professor was no saint, but he still seemed far safer than these rough men. After pretending to think it over, she chose to ride with the professor.
아저씨가 괜히 힘들잖아요.
그러세요, 그럼?
Seeing that the man agreed, the professor instinctively thanked him, but he failed to realize that the girl's decision had angered the man. The man's eyes turned cold, making the professor swallow nervously. Just then the sack on the motorcycle rolled to the ground. The man glanced at it and ordered one of his men to untie it. The boy was clearly traumatized. The moment he crawled out, he began apologizing non-stop. As soon as Ergo raised his stick, the man ordered him to stop. Then with a friendly smile, he invited the boy to join them for grilled meat. Seeing the fear in the boy's eyes, the girl became even more unsettled. Yet every reaction she had was carefully noticed by the man. Before the boy could even take a bite, he was ordered to participate in a little exercise.
열정 샷 우리밖에 수류탄 무궁연의 수류탄 무궁연의 수류탄.
The boy obediently cooperated. Even when struck, he did not dare resist. After they grew bored, they ordered him to take off his pants in front of everyone. The girl quickly pleaded for him, and repeatedly apologized for upsetting the man. The man still was not satisfied. He ordered the boy to remove his underwear as well. He glanced toward the girl, clearly trying to humiliate him on purpose. The girl angrily got up and tried to leave, but the thugs quickly dragged her back. She was humiliated, yet the professor remained silent the entire time. The girl could not take it anymore. She lashed out and called the professor a complete predator.
꼭 아는 사이처럼 말을 하네?
The professor tried to deny it, but when he saw the knife the man handed over, he quickly admitted that they knew each other. The man decided to stop pretending, and pulled out the student ID he had found in the car. He had figured everything out long ago, and had already guessed why they came into the mountains. The man turned to his followers, and ordered them to drag the girl into the car. Then he handed a bat to the professor and demanded a fight between him and the boy. Although the professor did not want to fight, the boy had already clenched his fists. He obeyed those men without question, and immediately kicked the professor to the ground. Just as the professor was about to give up, the boy heard the girl scream. Ergo was crouched by the car, greedily peeking inside. Xiaohei rushed out after hearing the noise, only to see the boy already in a fighting stance. The boy easily knocked Xiaohei down, and instantly gained confidence. It turned out these bullies were not as terrifying as he had imagined. Facing the red-haired thug, he took his stance once again. While they were tangled up, the girl managed to untie the rope around her hands. The professor no longer cared about the girl or his luxury car, and fled the scene during the chaos. The man silently picked up a bat and walked toward the boy with a vicious look. As the leader, he was clearly much tougher than his followers. He locked both hands around the boy's throat, and soon pinned him to the ground. Perhaps the boy had endured endured bullying for far too long, because at that moment all his hatred exploded. His strength became frightening. One roll completely reversed the fight. The boy knocked the man unconscious, then buried all four of them in the sand. Afterward he siphoned gasoline from the motorcycle, planning to burn them alive. The girl was horrified, and rushed over to stop him. While they were arguing, the man struck the boy down with a shovel, then desperately shook the others, soon waking the rest of the group. They pushed against the sand with all their strength, and struggled their way out of the pit. Ergo went wild and swung his club at the boy, then landed a heavy blow that knocked him unconscious. The others were startled by Ergo's reaction, and feared they had just become involved in a killing. Panicking, they stuffed the two of them into the trunk, then planned to push the car into the river with them inside. The professor ran back to the highway and flagged down a traffic officer, but fate had other plans. It was the same officer who had written him a ticket earlier. The professor immediately forced a smile, hoping the officer would let the pass slide. Then he tearfully explained what had happened, begging the officer to hurry and save them. The officer followed him to the riverbank, only to find the area completely deserted. The professor quickly pointed to an empty patch of ground, insisting that his car had been stuck there. The officer had lost all patience, and kicked him to the ground. No longer believing him, he got back on his motorcycle and prepared to leave. Just then a gunshot echoed from the mountain, followed by a vehicle rolling over. It slid a long distance before finally stopping. Hearing the shot, the officer rushed back and grabbed the professor.
고등학생 하나 있었다고 그랬지. 그 새끼 이름 뭐래?
The man climbed out of the vehicle, furious at whoever had fired the gun. He cursed non-stop, then began kicking the trunk repeatedly. The man opened the trunk, and the two captives immediately tumbled out. The boy was still alive, and was holding a gun in a final act of resistance. Seeing the man charging forward with a shovel, the girl quickly grabbed the pistol. The man was certain she would not shoot, and pressed his forehead against the barrel. The girl's hands trembled uncontrollably. She even shut her eyes in fear. Just as she was about to pull the trigger, the officer arrived in time. He seized the pistol and shoved the girl aside, but then the boy suddenly spoke, calling the officer his brother. Seeing his younger brother barely conscious, the officer forgot all about the stolen gun. Enraged, he grabbed the man by the collar, but the moment he saw his face, everything suddenly made sense. He hurriedly pulled open the man's shirt, revealing the half-meter scar. Back in middle school, the man had been bullied constantly. He and the officer had once been classmates, and that scar had been caused by the officer. The reason the man targeted the boy was entirely out of revenge. Only then did the officer realize his mistakes. He dropped to his knees before the man in remorse, begging him to end all of this, but the man refused to let it go. The officer let out a mocking laugh. Then he immediately cuffed the man, and repeatedly slapped him, trying to force him into submission through violence. Yet the man continued laughing without restraint. His constant taunting awakened the darkness inside the officer once again. The officer raised his helmet and smashed it into the man's face. Because of the man's orders, his followers did not dare interfere. When the man was finally knocked unconscious, they became helpless prey. The officer walked over with a grin, and thoroughly searched Ergo. He found a box of powder, then pulled out several mice, holding them at gunpoint. The officer reveled in bullying them. Then he picked up the box of powder, believing he had discovered illegal drugs. To make sure, he greedily tasted a large amount, but the professor immediately snatched the box away, saying it was merely throat medicine. Just as the officer was about to leave, a sharp pain suddenly hit his stomach, but he ignored it, and carried his younger brother away. Meanwhile, the man was rescued by his followers, who prepared to take him to the county hospital. After everything she had endured, the girl no longer dared say a word. At last the tow truck the man had called arrived, and the girl was finally free. Soon they came across the officer's motorcycle, but only the boy was still there. The officer had already died in the nearby river. It turned out that after Ergo got hold of the professor's box, he had secretly replaced the powder with rat poison. And that brings the movie to an end. I'm Matt, see you in the next episode.